Guys, I know that calling someone the best 4-star carry might not sound like the highest type of praise, but you all need to remember that Noelle has been bonking on opponents ever since Urina came out. Honestly speaking, when I finished calculating GaMing, I couldn't quite believe my results. And it wasn't because I didn't think it was going to be good, because I was quite sure that at the very least, the Cloud Retainer could push him to an acceptable level. But not only he is much better than acceptable, he also doesn't rely on the Cloud Retainer in the slightest. But let me contextualize things a bit by explaining his kit. He is a Pyro Claymore character with a pretty high base attack stat for a 4-star. First and foremost, he focuses on dealing plunge type of damage, but the way he can do it is pretty uncommon. Basically, he is nothing like this guy.
Worthless lament!
In fact, he doesn't have to jump in the air through the jump button and then plunge, but he will do it through his elemental skill, which will allow him to run towards the opponent, jump on top of him and then plunge. I wish I could show you the animation for this one because it's very cool, but unfortunately I can't unless I want to get a strike. The skill has a cooldown of 6 seconds, so normally you can't spam it, but luckily the elemental burst comes to the rescue with yet another quite original mechanic. The burst summons a little lion that will hit the opponent very hard and then link with GaMing. When this link happens, it will reset GaMing's elemental skill cooldown, allowing him to use it much faster than normal. While the burst is active if you use the elemental skill with GaMing, the lion will bounce again to a random part of the floor, and when it gets up, it will start running towards GaMing to link with him and reset the elemental skill cooldown again. Basically, during the 12 seconds duration of the elemental burst, you will be able to use the elemental skill a lot. The interesting part here, and it's also pretty funny honestly, is how the lion works. Honestly, after you use the elemental skill with him, you shouldn't really do anything other than trying to get near to the lion as fast as possible. If you ever played League of Legends, and if you did, that's unfortunate, he is kinda similar to Draven. As a baseline, his damage output looks pretty good because his elemental skill's motion value is comparable to the strongest high plunges we have in the game. Here is the thing, he is a character that will only be able to use 5 or 6 attacks in total during his rotation, including the elemental burst cast damage, so this includes the burst and then 5 plunges. This is extremely good for a character that can trigger amplifying reactions like melt and vaporize, because the more your damage is focused in few actions, the more you will be able to amplify your damage through these reactions. Take a character like Yoimiya for example, so a character that is notorious for her normal attack spam combos. The way she works, she's only able to trigger vaporize on a part of her damage because of how the internal cooldown works with her normal attacks. On the other hand, even at Constellation 0, the Lion Boy GaMing has a cumulative motion value of around 3000 that he can all vaporize or melt, and that is big. Additionally, despite being from Liyue, he has the kind of HP manipulation abilities the Fontaine characters have. In fact, his elemental skill will drain HP from him and then heal him back, and also his elemental burst has a healing effect too. This makes him able to use the Marachusei set even without Furina, which is great considering how strong this set is. Can this character stop winning, please? Mihoyo, he is a 4-star! Of course though, his constellations help him a lot. The Constellation 1 adds another healing effect to his kit, which helps with Marachusei even more. The Constellation 2 grants him an attack percent bonus when he gets overhealed. The Constellation 4 makes him recover 2 energy when he uses his plunge attack from the elemental skill, which is actually pretty comfy considering that a Constellation 0, from what I've calculated, he needs around 150 energy on basically all teams. The Constellation 6 is broken because it adds 80% extra crit value to his elemental skill hits, which puts it in range with most 5-star Constellation 6 honestly, it's absurd. On top of that, it extends the AoE of his plunge attacks to the level of Shao. Now, it's not like he needs Constellations to be good, he is a great character nonetheless, as we'll see later in the video, but he definitely gains a lot if you get him to Constellation 6, he will feel like a completely different character. Now, finally the truly juicy part, his potential on teams. So, as I said before, it doesn't really rely on the Cloud Retainer a lot, because the Cloud Retainer's main potential over a character like Kazuha is enabling the character to do the plunges in the first place. Plunges are high value attacks that if you can magnify through amplifying reactions, they will do a lot of damage, so enabling them is incredibly valuable. But if the character can already do the plunges, then the Cloud Retainer's value boils down to her buffing abilities and her healing in synergy with Furina. Honestly, it's a trade-off kinda thing. I've analyzed two different Vape teams, one with the Cloud Retainer and one with Kazuha, and outside of them Furina, Bennett and Lion Boy. And with the Cloud Retainer you get more healing, which really helps a lot in generating the stacks for the Furina burst, while with Kazuha you get more consistent Hydro aura on opponents thanks to his burst absorption, and you can also swirl Pyro through his elemental skill. As I said in my Xianyun video, her swirling capabilities are just not fast enough to swirl Pyro in these teams, because with Furina in the way, the opponents will get a lot of Hydro aura throughout the rotation. Meanwhile, with Kazuha's elemental skill that has a very quick cast, you can swirl Pyro right after Bennett's window. But even then, there is a room for error depending on how fast you are with Kazuha, and if you can't swirl Pyro, then the Cloud Retainer variant is definitely superior. Basically, if you are skill issued at least in single target, the Cloud Retainer variant should be better. Here the numbers range from decent if you have a Constellation 6 Lion Boy, to mind-bogglingly great if you have a Constellation 6 version of him, honestly. I know I said that he might be the best 4-star carry, but honestly at Constellation 6 he competes very evenly with the 5-star Pyro carries, and no, why stop there? He competes with most 5-star carries in the game. Another interesting aspect is that if he's on banner with the Cloud Retainer, and hopefully he is, Oyovers please don't troll, if you aim at getting his Constellation 6, then there is a very good chance you might get the Constellation 2 for Cloud Retainer. In case you don't know, the Constellation 2 basically doubles the impact of her passive on your damage. So with a fully whaled team with Constellation 6 Lion Boy and Constellation 2 Cloud Retainer, things look pretty absurd. But as I've said earlier, he's really not tied to the Cloud Retainer in a way that is not usable without him. He is great in the variant with Kazuha and is also great in other types of teams. The most interesting between them is probably Melt. I've tried to calculate Melt with Rosaria specifically. When it comes to Pyro melting, the issue with most characters is keeping the cryo aura on opponents. But that's not the issue for the Lion Boy, whose hit frequency is pretty low. Now, if you play a character like Rosaria with him, who has a pretty low hit frequency as well, 1 every 2 seconds with Elemental Burst, you have to time the Elemental skill hits a bit with Lion Boy, presumably, in order to melt all hits. But that's not a flaw that is damaging to a point that makes the team clunky to me, it's just a playstyle. As you can see in the gameplay clip I'm showing you here that has been recorded with Diluc instead of the Lion Boy, of course, there is a bit of a delay between the plunges for Diluc, but not to the point it's extremely clunky. The team damage output is pretty comparable to the Furina variants here, which is pretty impressive considering you're using Rosaria instead. I picked Kazuha instead of the Cloud Retainer here because his burst absorbing cryo at the start of the rotation is pretty useful, because when you go in with the Lion Boy and use the burst and then the elemental skill, if you want to melt both of these hits in quick succession, you probably need that kind of application from Kazuha. Of course, since in this scenario the damage contribution for the team from GaMing is higher compared to the other Vape variants, his reliance on Constellations to feel great is much higher here. I've also checked his potential on Mono Pyro teams, and honestly it's pretty good if you have him at Constellation 6. It's comparable to Klee give or take, which is nice. The Line Mono Pyro variant is superior on paper, but with GaMing you should get much more AoE, and honestly I still find it funny that I'm comparing this 4-star character to seriously great 5-star characters. So yeah, GaMing, great. Honestly, if his Constellation 6 variant was released as a 5-star character, you would not be complaining. He would be pretty balanced, maybe even more than balanced. And with this, I'm done for today. Peace.